really the first sugya that we're going to really be dealing with is the sugya of Tefillas Tashlumin. You familiar with that concept? Tashlumin, and the ability to quote unquote make up if you miss a tefillah that you can daven later, and that's going to be it's a very interesting, very geschmacka sugyas, a lot of lovely lamdas. But first, we've got some basic work to do. Okay, so I'll run through it again very quickly through the Mishnah. Tefillas Hashachar ad Chatzos. There are two primary opinions in the Mishnah. Until when can you daven Shachris? The Rosh points out immediately, why do we not start talking about the earliest time you can daven Shachris? And we saw that on Monday, but we're talking about the latest time. So Tefillas Hashachar is until midday. That is the opinion of the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad daled sho'os. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, Shachris is not until Chatzos. Shachris is until 4 hours into the day. And indeed, that is how we pasken. We'll come back to that. Tefillas ha-mincha ad ha'erev. Mincha is until night. What does night mean? That's another sugya. Rashi says, remember the Rashi? Rashi says, chashecha ad chashecha. That sounds like till it's dark, choshech. We will see, not this time, but Hashem, next time on Monday, we will see the Rabbeinu Yoina on the Rif that has a whole different pshat. Okay, but let's keep going. Now, that was Shachris and Mincha. But Mincha, the first opinion is Mincha you can say until Ad HaErev, until night. Rabbi Yehuda Oimad Plaga Mincha. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no. You can only daven Mincha until Plag HaMincha. What is Plag HaMincha? Does anybody know what Plag HaMincha is?
Half between Hitzot and Shkia.
Yeah. Well, there's two opinions as to half between what, but it is, and we'll talk about that. We'll do. There's a sugi about Plag as well, which is fascinating. Tefillas ha'erev ein lo keva. Mariv ein lo keva. It doesn't have keva. What does that word keva mean? Kviut. What does it mean? Fixed. It isn't fixed. What does that mean? It isn't fixed. Says Rashi. Let's learn Rashi. Says Rashi, Ein lo keva, kol halaylo zmano. We are talking about, when we spoke about Shachris and we spoke about Mincha, we were saying that with Shachris, you can't say Shachris all day. It has begrenzt, yeah? You can, Arba Shois or Chatzos, a Mincha maybe is Ad HaErev, could be. Whereas Tefillas HaErev, according to what the Mishnah says, Ein lo keva. Anytime, as long as it's night, you can daven Mariv. Ein lo keva. Within the period of time which is appropriate for Mariv, there is no fixed thing. Kol halaylo zmano. Fine. Musaf, what about Musaf? V'shal Musafim kol hayoim. Musaf you can daven all day, and well, from a certain time. Rabbi Yehuda says ad zayin shows till 7 hours. That's the Mishnah. Let's go straight into the Gemara, because, and this is Chazara for us, we're here on Monday, but we want to get into the next piece, and we really need to get our teeth into the sugya. V'raminhu. I will ask you a question, more than a question, it's almost the word we use, raminu, the literal translation means, raminhu is werfen, it means to throw, literally. It means you take two things and you throw them one against the other, indicating what you guys call, I think, a Widerspruch, right? A contradiction. V'raminu. How can you tell me that Tefillas Hashachar is till Chatzos or till Daled Shois, but there is a brisa which says mitzvoso im honetz hachamo, that Shachris should be said, ideally mitzvoso is im honetz hachamo, directly with sunrise. Why? K'dei sheyismach geula l'tfilah. Why do we want to do that then? Because the optimal time to say Shema is you say Shema just before sunrise, and at sunrise you say Shemona Esra. Why put the two things together? Kedei sheyismach geula l'tfilah. And this is a whole separate topic. That it's a big deal to have the brocha Go'al Yisrael juxtaposed right next to tefillah. So in order to do everything to keep everybody happy, what do? We say Shema just before sunrise. Then we say Geula Baruch Atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael, and at the moment of sunrise we say Shemona Esra. So what's the question? The question is, you're telling me Shachar is until Chatzois or Daled. Can't be. It is... Oh, I thought it wasn't recording. Yes, it has to be... I thought it has to be much, much earlier. Answers the Gemara, a fascinating answer, which we really, today, we're going to try and understand. Okay? Answers the Gemara, Kitan Yahi levosikin. You're confusing two different things. There is something called vosikin. Vosikin, what are they? These were people who are very particular. Rashi says over here, if I'm not mistaken, hamakdimin lemitzvos umachazrin lasistova bizmanoi. People who are very particular to do mitzvahs in the most optimal, ideal, in the ideal way. If you want to know how to do the mitzvah of, let's call it Tefillah, in the right way, the best possible way is this way, what we just discussed. Shema just before sunrise, Geula Tefillah, and then Shemini Esrei. Fine. That is called Vasikin. The Omer Rabbi Yochanan, for Rabbi Yochanan said, Vasikin, hayu goimrin oisa im hanetzachamo. Vasikin would finish it. It's a question whether it means finish. It means that they would say Shema just before, and Shemini Esrei would be synchronized with sunrise. Fine. But that's Vasikin. That's the ideal way. But that doesn't mean that's the only time you can say Shema. So it's a very simple answer. It seems to be a very straightforward answer. There is an ideal way, there is the best possible way of doing it, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan was talking about, Vasikin. But if somebody chooses not to do it that way, he still needs to know what is my last point, my cutoff point, beyond which I cannot say Shacharis. And that's what our Mishnah deals with. In other words, they're talking about two different things. In our world, we would probably call one, I don't know if you'd call it necessarily lechatchila or b'di'eved, ideally or post facto, but certainly two levels of performing the same mitzvah. And that's the answer. Says the Gemara, hold on a second. And this is where really we segue into a whole new sugya, which will go on over the page, and it is a most incredible, interesting, fascinating geshmaka sugya with lots and lots of really juicy lamdas. Okay? The sugya begadol is called the sugya of tashlumin. There is a concept of being able to play catch-up. You missed mincha, you can daven mariv twice, you missed shachris, and this is what we're going to be delving into. Okay? Now, let's see. So this is how the Gemara frames it. V'kula alma ad chatzois v'suloi. Okay, I've accepted your answer. Our Mishnah is talking about the latest time. Well, that's not right either. V'kula alma, that abbreviation is kol ha'olam, kula alma, the whole world. In other words, is it definitely unanimous? Does everybody agree that you only have until chatzois v'suloi, and furthermore not? Are you telling me that's the last time? That is simply incorrect, because V'ha'oma, Rav Mori Breder, Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba, Rav Yochanan, all of these Amayim said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan the following: Ta'a, if you made a mistake, V'lo hispalel arvis, if a person made a mistake and didn't daven mariv, forgot, let's say, made a mistake and didn't daven mariv, says Rabbi Yochanan, mispalel b'shachris shtayim. You can play catch up and daven shachris twice. Right? And that will somehow, well, we'll have to see. That's really the question. Well, what is it? What is this? We'll have to see what this is. But, so you can't tell me, our Mishnah tells me, Tefillas Hashachar, two opinions, either till 4 hours or until Chatzos, but not afterwards. Not true. Rabbi Yochanan says there is an opportunity to play catch-up. Because the Rabbi Yochanan said, if you made a mistake and you didn't daven mariv, mispal shachris time, you can do shachris twice. Shachris, if you forgot to daven shachris, mispalel b'mincha shtayim. So you can daven mincha twice. That is the question. And we need to ask ourselves immediately exactly what that question is. What is that question? We'll come back to it to understand clearly the question. On the face of it, it's probably quite straightforward. You in the Mishnah have told me that my latest possible time to daven shacharis is chatzos. Rabbi Yochanan told me that you can daven shacharis later. That's the way. If you don't learn that, then we have no question. You with me? This is all about definitions. Says the Gemara, no, you've misunderstood. You've misunderstood. Kuli at yoima. Kuli yoima matzli va'ozil. I'm going to translate because it gets very subtle. This is the answer. Kuli yoima, the entire day, matzli, that's the Aramaic word for davening. Matzli va'ozil. You can go on and daven. You misunderstood. You misinterpreted the Mishnah. You thought the Mishnah meant, as it says on the tin, Tefillas Hashachar can only be said very, very, very latest until Chatzos. Not true. That's simply not. You misunderstood the Mishnah. That's not what the Mishnah is telling me. The truth is, Kula Yoma Ozli Matzil, Matzli Ozil. Shacharis can be said the entire day. Kuli Yoma, the whole day. Matzli Ozil. You can keep going and davening. But, what do you know what our Mishnah was telling me? Ad Chatzos. What the Mishnah is telling me is that if you daven, there is an ideal time bracket within which you should daven. There is such a thing as the Zman of Tefillah. The Zman of Tefillah, of Tefillas Shacharis, is either up until 4 hours or up until Chatzos. And if you daven within that time frame, you receive the reward. This is the way the Gemara explains it. You get schar, 3 words, schar tefillah bizmano. Our Mishnah is telling us the time, the parameters of within which that time you daven, shacharis, you get schar tefillah bizmano. You get the reward of having daven shacharis in the correct time. Mikan va'elech. From then onwards, in other words, if you were to daven shacharis later, i.e., the question that we asked from Rabbi Yochanan, I forgot Shacharis by Chatzos, says Rabbi Yochanan, it's okay, you can daven Mincha twice, and the Gemara seems to be understanding that this is a Shacharis. Otherwise there's no question, are you with me? Mikan va'elech, from then on, Schar Tefillah Yohavele, you can still get the Schar of Tefillah, your reward of tefillah, but that word is a word that we've dropped a word. What's the word? Bizmana. If you daven shacharis before chatzos, you end up getting something called schar tefillah bizmana, the reward of having davened in the right time. If you didn't, you forgot, says Rabbi Yochanan, you daven mincha twice, but somehow the Gemara seems to be understanding that somehow it's a shacharis. How can it be a shacharis? I thought shacharis is only up until chatzos. No, shacharis is really all day. But, and this is really, we need to understand this. Make up your mind. We have to be very, very, it's like law, right? We have to have at least 2, 3 lawyers in the room. No, 2 for sure. We've got to be very, very precise, and a man of science, and etc. So we've got to be very precise. So what's going on? To get the reward of tefillah bismano, you have to say it before chatzos. But afterwards, mikan va'elech schar tefillah yohavele, we will give you reward of davening, but schar tefillah bismano lo yohavele. What you won't get is the schar of tefillah in its right time. And to me, that's the end of this little piece of Gemara. To me, this is somewhat unclear. What exactly is going on here? When you learn a Gemara, there are usually 2 stages. There is what we call the Hava Amina, my initial perspective, what I thought, and then the Gemara sometimes we go through multiple stages of Hava Amina, and through dialectic, through asking, through answering, through proving, disproving, we end up with a final, usually, hopefully, end up with what's called a maskana, which means the final understanding of whatever it is that we're learning. And in Yiddish we say, forgive me, the Hava Amina darf euch sein emes. Darf doesn't mean allowed, it means needs in Yiddish. The Hava Amina darf euch sein emes. A Hava Amina also has to be true. It's not just some crazy notion. You always have to understand what was the Hava Amina, what was the maskana. Okay? So here we have a Hava Amina and a maskana. The Hava Amina was that you could only daven Shacharis until Chatzos. And then we come up with a new thing, and we say, no. It seems that Shacharis can be davened later, but you get reward for tefillah, but not reward for tefillah bizmana. That's what it seems to be saying. But as we're going to discover, it's not so simple. And what I'd like to do tonight is push on a bit, and then we'll come back and revisit this. What I'd like to do tonight is to get to the bottom of the Amud. Okay? It's not as bad as it looks. Let's push on, and I'll explain it all very clearly. Did you notice in the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, he said, how many halachas did Rabbi Yochanan say? He said 2 halachas. If a person forgot to daven Ma'ariv, you can do 2 Shacharis. He then went and said, if you forgot to daven Shacharis, you can do 2 Minchas. What's missing? That's right, if you forgot Mincha. And the Gemara immediately jumps in. Iboilahu. The question was posed by the Bnei HaYeshiva. They asked, what would be Ta'ah v'lo hispalel Mincha? What would be the missing piece of the puzzle? What would be if you forgot to daven Mincha? Can you daven Ma'ariv twice? And the Gemara doesn't just ask the question, it speaks out the 2 possibilities. And it says as follows. Im timtza loymar. If you wish to say, well, we do, because Rabbi Yochanan said it. Even if I'm going to go along with what Rabbi Yochanan said. Ta'ah v'lo yispalel arvis mispalel shacharis shtayim. If I go along with what Rabbi Yochanan said, that somebody forgot to daven Ma'ariv, he can daven Shacharis twice, I get that. That's okay. Why? Mishum dechad yoimahu. That's the same day. The Jewish day goes night first. Mishum dechad yoimahu. Within one day, I can accept the notion of tefillah somehow being connected and related to a day, and within that day, the day starts at night. So I didn't say Ma'ariv, so I can somehow play catch up in the morning, it's the next day. That's how the Jewish day works, I get that. But maybe, but over here, tefillah b'mokim korban hi. Tefillos were instituted in place of the sacrifices, the korbanos. V'chiv and avayomo bottle korbanoi. There is a concept in korbanos that when the day has gone, avayomo bottle korbanoi. The korban is gone. So therefore, I might have thought, that perhaps if you missed mincha, which is keneged, we'll see whether it's like toires or whatever korban it is. So, and now it's a new day. So if you missed mincha, perhaps you can't do a new Ma'ariv. Don't bring me a proof from the fact if you missed Ma'ariv, you can do 2 Shacharis. That's different because it's the same day, and within the same day, maybe you can play catch up. So this is the first horn of my dilemma. This is the first tzad, the first possibility. Oidilma. Or perhaps, the way to remember that is dilemma. Oidilma, or perhaps, kivan dit selusa rachamehi. Despite the fact that maybe it was somewhat loosely based on korbanos, but never forget what tefillah is. What is tefillah? Rachami, meaning begging for all the things that we need. Supplication is the right word in English. Tefillah rachami, we're asking Hashem for rachamim. At the end of the day, maybe, okay, I understand it's loosely based on the korbanos, but at the end of the day, it is asking for something. Tefillah is rachami, and therefore kol emas de boy matzli va'ozel, and therefore by that logic, we would ignore the fact that it's somewhat based on korbanos and the korban is gone, but whatever mincha does, mincha is important, right? Mincha is really important. So maybe, yes, it was based loosely on a ketores or something, and that's gone. But I still need whatever it is that mincha does. It's tzlusi, it's rachami. You need to ask rachamim of Hashem. By the way, the Gemara says earlier in Tafchof, are women obligated in davening?
No.
I think yes.
He's right. Of course they are. But the Gemara, you're both kind of right. You're right in theory, he's right in practice. And the Gemara asks, why did you say no?
Because women are not obligated in mitzvos.
Shazman Groma. And in theory, you're absolutely right. So much so, the Gemara asks that. And the Gemara, the Gemara answers and says they are nevertheless obligated, says the Gemara in Tafchof, because tefillah rachami, and women need rachamim as well. that's the Lashon Gemara. And women, literally, I'm translating Gemara. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's a mitzvah say shazman grama, but focus on what tefillah is. I'm not here to give you a hashkafa shir on tefillah, but tefillah is the key that unlocks everything that you may have created as a spiritual repository. It's the if you don't have the Wi-Fi code, you can pay for something. The mashal I like to give, you may have heard it from me in drashas. It's a bit like, your great uncle dies and leaves you millions and millions and millions of euros in a Geneva numbered account, and you have the title deed and the will. It's no question, the money's yours, but he forgot to give you the number. Game over. There is no question of ownership. The money is yours. It's coded, sealed, it's everything. It's yours. It's your money. No question of ownership. But you cannot access it. You need the code. It's the same with tefillah. Tefillah unlocks and releases. It can also create, and that's a separate shmooze. But tefillah, without tefillah, nothing goes. You can deserve it, but if you don't daven, you won't get it. And that's another whole shmooze. So tefillah is important, right? Rachami. It's rachami. And therefore women need it, even though it's mitzvah seishas man groma. And therefore the Gemara suggests here in the second side of the doubt, maybe despite the fact that it's based on korbanos, but at the end of the day I need a mincha, and as long as therefore I should be able to catch up, from that perspective maybe I should be able to catch up mincha with 2 ma'arivs. Why not? And that is the iboy lahu. Got you with me? That's the shaila that we're left with at the moment, and the Gemara is now going to prove what the halach is. Toshma, come in here, which is the standard way that we introduce a proof. Toshma, come and hear. Another statement from Rabbi Yochanan, and this is quite interesting. So we have a doubt in Rabbi Yochanan. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says that if you miss Shacharis, if you miss Ma'ariv, you can do 2 Shacharis. If you miss Shacharis, you can do 2 Mincha. We asked, what would Rabbi Yochanan hold? If you miss Mincha, can you do 2 Ma'ariv? Not sure. We're going to bring a proof from another statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah? Toshma. Da'omar Rav Huna bar Rabbi Yochanan. Ta v'loi hispalel mincha, mispalel arvis shtayim, ve'ein bezeh mishum da'ovar yoimoi batel karbonai. We found an Amoira who did have a very clear, explicit, received oral tradition from Rabbi Yochanan on this very thing. For some reason in the other tradition, only Shacharis and Ma'ariv and Shacharis were mentioned. We found another Amoira who had a received tradition exactly on this, and Rabbi Yochanan said, yes, it's exactly the same, and don't start driving me mad about, the day's gone and the korban. No, it's rachami, you need it. Finished. Fine. And it would seem to be the end of that. But now the Gemara throws a spanner in the works, as we say in English. Meisavei. Meisavei is a question. I'll ask you a question.
All right. Is it technically a Moraic statement?
I think it is a Tosefta, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's see. There is a posuk in Koheles which says as follows. 2 parts to the posuk. Me'uvas lo yuchal liskoin, v'chisaroin lo yuchal lehimonois. Now, what does this mean? I'll first give you the broad meaning of it, and then we'll go drill down into the details. The broad meaning is that sometimes in life, there are opportunities, and if you lose them, they're gone forever. That's the bottom line. Me'uvas, ivus is in the Hebrew word for when something goes a little bit off. Me'uvas, sometimes when something goes a bit off, lo yuchal liskoin, it is not possible to farishten. You can't make it right again. Letaken, that's the word. Letaken. V'chisaroin is the word of when you're missing, when there's a lack. Lo yuchal lehimonois, it cannot once again be filled. What does this refer to? So I think it's a Tosefta, says, Me'uva lo yuchal liskoin. The first part of this pasuk in Kehilim, Zeh shebitel kriyas shma shel arvis, v'kriyas shma shel shachris, oy tefillah shel arvis, oy tefillah shel shachris. So the Brisa gives here 4 examples of an opportunity that has gone and cannot be rectified. What are they? Kriya Shema at night or Kriya Shema in the morning, Tefillah at night or Tefillah in the morning. So Tefillah Shacharis, Tefillah Ma'ariv, Kriya Shema of the night, Kriya Shema of the day. Says the Brisa, once they're gone, they're gone. Now the second part of the pasuk, V'chisaroin lo yuchal lehimonois. What is this referring to? We'll mention it because we'll say it because it's here. It's not what we're going to focus on. Zeh shenimnu chaveirav lidvar mitzvah v'lo nimna imahem. This is referring to something slightly differently. This is referring to a group of people, a Chabura, a group of people who've chosen to do a mitzvah, and he stays at home, Netflix and chill. He doesn't join in with them. They go so that opportunity has gone. Fine. What's the question? Question's obvious. Rabbi Yochanan came along and said, you miss Shacharis, you can make it up with Mincha. You miss Mincha, you can make it up with Mariv. You miss Mariv, you can make it up with Shacharis. And now we have a brisa which seems to say, no, the definition of a lost opportunity is once the Shacharis is gone, it's gone. That's the question of the Gemara. Yeah, simple question, straightforward question. Answers the Gemara, and one more line, and then we'll go over it. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan defends himself. Hacha b'mayaskinon. Do you know what we're talking about over here in this brisa, which says that once the opportunity is gone, it's gone? Shebitel b'mezid. No, here we are talking about somebody who absichtlich b'mezid b'kavana. He said, I'm not davening Shacharis. Nah, I'm not davening Shacharis today. Whatever. He did it b'mezid. It wasn't. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan said, well, go back to the various iterations of Rabbi Yochanan, he always says, ta'ut, a mistake, I forgot. I was running late. It was not b'mezid. So now we have Rabbi Yochanan is conceding. And he's saying as follows. Sometimes, it depends. Sometimes there is an opportunity such as Shacharis, which, once the moment has gone, it has really gone, and gone forever. And that is if you do it b'mezid. And there's another time where you can still get a Shacharis in, so to speak. There you can play catch-up, and we need to discuss exactly what that means. And that is ta'ah, if you made a mistake. And this actually is the maskana of the Gemara, and this is brought in Halacha and Shulchan Aruch, Erechaim Siman Kuf Ches, which we will eventually learn once we've wrapped up all the bits of the sugya. Last half a line, Omer Ravashi. Ravashi backs this up and supports it. De Konami. You can even, this can be seen, this can be worked out actually from the language. Diktoni bitel. Veloiktoni ta'ah. Look at this brisa. What did it say? That would imply bitel. He, with consciousness, he was mevatelit. In other words, it didn't say ta'ah. It used a very specific word, bitel. Botel means he did it absichtlich, right? That's the right word in German, I think, yeah. Veloiktoni ta'ah, shmami no. And that's the end of that. For the moment. Over the page starts another part of this sugya, but we are done now. Let's review very quickly, and in the bit of time that we have, we'll start going a little bit deeper. Okay, so let's review what do we have. We had a Mishnah. In the Mishnah, there were two opinions as to until when you can say Shacharis. The Tana Kama says until Chatzos, and Rabbi Yehuda says till Daled Shois. We then had a Gemara that brought about Vosikin, and we said, no, Vosikin is the ideal way to do it, and I'm not really that worried about that. Then we bring in Rabbi Yochanan, who says that if somebody made a mistake and he didn't daven Mariv, he can do Shacharis again. So how can you tell me? The Mishnah would seem to imply that you only have very latest until Chatzos. Once Chatzos is gone, Shacharis is gone. But Rabbi Yochanan tells us that you can make it up. And the Gemara then gives a very interesting answer. The Gemara says, and I quote, what the Mishnah is talking about is getting schar tefillah bizmano. The Mishnah is talking about getting reward for having done tefillah in its right time. Rabbi Yochanan is talking about getting schar tefillah, but not bizmano. And I think the first question, ask me a question. I tell you what's bothering me here, but I'm happy to hear what you think.
Is it worse to not have bismano?
Oh, definitely. Of course you should do it bismano. Well, what's the question about that?
Do you see it from the text?
Yeah, davening before Chatzos. There's no question. I don't think that's...
But you get two, okay.
What should you do daven before Chatzos? And if you do, good boy, you'll get schar tefillah bismano. I'll tell you what's bothering me. I'm happy to hear if anybody's got any questions, but what I don't understand is if... And really, this is a question that I looked around and I found the Pnei Yeshua and the Nachlas David sort of both ask us sort of a simple questions. Let's go back to the question. What's the question? The question is, the Mishnah says you should daven Shacharis before Chatzos. Right? Then we ask on that, implying that after Chatzos you're done. There's no more Shacharis. We ask a question from Rabbi Yochanan from Tefillas Tashlumin. What's the question? Tashlumin is a whole different thing. Tashlumin is... What the word Tashlumin? Do you know what the word Tashlumin means? I don't know how to translate it in German. Tashlumin is reparations. There's a nice German word for you, right?
Wiedergutmachung.
Wiedergutmachen. Ja, etwas so. Das heißt wieder... But it's not Shacharis. No, Shacharis. Shacharis is until Chatzos. So what is it? Das ist eine gute Frage. There's something called Tefillas Tashlumin. I don't know yet what it is. I genuinely don't know. But it's a weird thing. Because otherwise, if it's just Shacharis, then, of course, then you have a problem. What's the answer? Well, the answer is it's Tashlumin. But I knew it was Tashlumin. Ta'ah v'loi hispalel. So what's actually really going on? You hear the problem. Well, what did I think and what didn't I know? I knew there's Tashlumin. I know there is such a thing as Tashlumin. So, but you ask, Tashlumin is not Shacharis. It's something called Tashlumin. I don't know what it is yet.
I mean,
so,
sorry, can
Yeah,
I
yeah.
ask you a question?
you just did. You want another one?
Yeah,
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Related.
Yes, go on, of course.
For what you need the Tashlumin for the Shacharis? Shacharis is gone and that's it. What is the reason? What is that you need to repair it? For what?
Well, that's not... you miss Shacharis! Oi! You miss Shacharis, and somehow... And we're going to have to actually... Not for what? I mean... part of your question, I think, if you want to have something to think about, is why then does it only work for a shogeg and not a mazid? What does that mean? If you can repair it, then... Are you telling me you can only repair a shogeg? Is that logical? Does that kind of make sense?
yeah, it does make sense. Because Shlum is a right. You gain the right to Shlumim by
So
not doing it
interesting.
b'mezid.
That's a very interesting approach, because usually in halacha, it's an obligation, not a right. That's how halacha works.
You get an opportunity for schar.
Wow.
You can also miss the Tashlumim if you don't want to.
Yeah, we're going to come to that. That's another whole sugya.
Because
yes.
later you have other mitzvahs before you. Also later in the afternoon, maybe why not more concentrate on mincha, or the mitzvahs to concentrate what is now, and for what to think about the past. That might be.
Because there is something called shacharis, and it's very, 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 very important. And for some reason, the Torah gave you the opportunity and thus the obligation to be able to somehow l'shalem, to get reparations. And this is exactly what we need to try and work out. What exactly is going on over here?
There's technically even a third option.
Go on.
I learned when if you didn't say shacharis, but you didn't have to. So, for example, you are involved in a different mitzvah.
Okay,
No,
we will
tashlumin.
get to that. But it's still tashlumin. It's an adova. We'll get to that. We will get to that eventually, but that's not what the Gemara is talking about.
Okay.
We will eventually. It's a nice point. We will get to it. And you know, when I had to, I went into this sugya very, very in quite a detailed manner when I was involved in as being posek for the Hatzalah in Edgware. So there's all sorts of interesting things. You know, you're in the middle of eating matzah, or you're in the middle of Yom Kippur Shmones, whatever it is, and a call comes through and you drop everything, you just run. Shacharis, Shmones Esrei, whatever. When do you have to say again, and when don't you? And it depends on a bunch of whole different things, and it's not really quite complicated. But the question that the Pnei Yeshua and the Nachlas Dovid ask is, we know there's something called Tashlumin, and there is something called Shacharis. What is the question? Why you're asking apples and pears? If it's a big if we say that Shacharis and Tashlumin are two different things, then there's no question. But the Gemara did ask the question. So what did the Gemara think? What was the Gemara thinking when it asked? And here we have a machloikas between the Nachlas David and the Pnei Yeshua, which I'll share with you. And the Ron Afkamina's halacha lemaisa, which we probably won't get to tonight. It goes like this. So the Nachlas David learns that the Gemara's question was nothing to do with Tashlumin. The Gemara understood that when Rabbi Yochanan says that if you miss Shachris, you can daven Mincha twice, what he's telling me is there is a concept called Shacharis Shaloi Bizmano. That's what we thought, and that's the question. You're telling me now the question of the Gemara makes sense, says the Nachlas David. You're telling me Tefillas Hashachar is ad Chatzois or ad Arba Shois. Not true. That's only part of Shachris. That's what we call Shachris Bizmano. But there is something else. Rabbi Yochanan says if you didn't daven Mincha, Mariv, you can daven again twice. If you didn't daven Shachris, you can say Mincha twice. So what is that second one? It's a Shachris. It's a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. What does that even mean? Good question. But there is something called a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. So therefore, you in the Mishnah think you are trying to tell me all of the halachas about Shachris. It's incorrect. There is a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. That was the Gemara's question. Stimmt? I think that's very logical.
The question rises.
And the Gemara answer. Sorry.
Just continue. Okay, next slide.
And the Gemara's answer, says the Nachlas David, is precisely that no, it's not a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. It's Tashlumin. It's a new beast. It's a new animal. It's called Tashlumin. And we still have to work out what it is.
Doesn't say that once.
Doesn't say what once.
Tashlumin, the word.
The word, okay. But that you're right. First of all, by the way, the word does come in later, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
The concept, forget the word. The word is irrelevant. You can call it whatever you like. But the understanding of the sugya, according to the Nachlas David, is as follows. Our question was, you told me I can only daven Shachris, the very latest I can daven Shachris is Chatzois. It's not true. I can daven Shachris. Rabbi Yochanan tells me I can daven Shachris later because we thought it's a Shachris, but it's a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. And the answer is it's not a Shachris at all. It's something new. I call it Tashlumin. You can call it potatoes, tomatoes. It doesn't matter.
I mean, Tashlum is necessarily outside knowledge. It's necessarily bound to another tefillah. It
ain't Shachris.
It always has to be after the second one, after a different tefillah. Tashlum is only after mincha or after the next tefillah. Meaning, but there is a gap still. There's still a gap between the latest time of Shachris and the earliest time for mincha.
And that's very good. That's the Gemara's answer.
Can't say anything.
That's a prima godim, and that's not so poshut. You're going into a very interesting thing. You know too much. That's a problem. It's a fascinating. It's a Mogen Avram, I think. Can you daven it in no man's land, in the half an hour after Chatzos, before the time you can daven? We will get to that. I've prepared it. We will get to it. I'm trying to build things up logically and slowly. But I think we don't need to get onto what you're asking yet. Let me try and explain carefully and clearly. According to the Nachlas David, the question was: we understood that when Rabbi Yochanan says if you forget Shachris, you can daven Mincha twice. We thought that what is it? The second tefillah is a Shacharis Shaloi Bizmano. And then there's a very simple logical question. In the Mishnah, you told me Shacharis is only until Chatzos. It's not true. There is a subcategory of Shacharis called Shacharis Shaloi Bizmano, which you can do later. That was the question. Answer: it is not a Shacharis. What is it? Eine gute Frage. We'll have to work it out. I call it Tashlumin. You can call it something else. Doesn't matter. But it's not a Shacharis, and thus unrelated to our sugya. That is the way. You with me? This is classic, simple lomdus. It's about the categorization. That was the way the Nachlas David understood it. The Pnei Yeshua, on the other hand, and therefore, hold on a second, and therefore the Nachlas David comes up with a very interesting thing. Do you remember we started at the beginning of the sugya, we said, before we got to the question from Rabbi Yochanan, we introduced this concept of Schat Tefillah Bizmano and Tefillah Shaloi Bizmano. Says the Nachlas David, once we get to the end of the sugya, it's gone. We no longer have that. That's incorrect. It's no longer correct. We now reject that. As part of the understanding of this sugya, i.e., We thought that there was something called the Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. We then rejected it and said, no, it's something new. We're going to call it Tashlumin. It's not a Shachris. I don't know what it is. There is no such thing as a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. Therefore, you can't get Schar Tefillah, meaning what the Gemara said before, that there is such a thing as a Schar for Shachris, but it's just not Bizmano. There ain't no such thing as Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. Shachris is begrenzt till 4 Shois or till Chatzais. Afterwards, you're done. There's something else you can possibly do called Tashlumin, which we're going to have to explore what exactly that is. But it's got nothing to do with Shachris. So that bit of Gemara now goes, according to the Nachlas David. So far, so good. You with me? The Pnei Yeshua learns differently. The Pnei Yeshua says as follows. The question was, we knew right from the get-go, from the start, the question was, Tashlumin. We knew it was Tashlumin. But what was the definition of Tashlumin, says the Pnei Yeshua? We said the definition of Tashlumin is a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. That's what it is. It's a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. Hence we have a question. 1 second. Rega. And the Rega. Sorry, I'm confusing myself now.
But it doesn't exist.
Rega. According to Nachlas David, it doesn't. He's obviously going to learn the Gemara differently. Give me a second. Sorry. It's a Shachar Shalei Bizmano. And have a minute, there was a Maskana. And he says, yes, he says it stays the same. It is a Shachris. It is a Shachris. That remains. But it's a Shachris. He maintains the concept of a Shachris Shalei Bizmano. It is a Shachris Shalei Bizmano. But then we have a problem. If you can daven Shachris Shalei Bizmano, and this is what you said before, where what you said before comes in. In other words, according to the Pnei Yeshua, both in the question and the answer, we knew it was Tashlumin. So why did we ask, how can you ask from Tashlumin? I thought Tashlumin is something else. No. The Pnei Yeshua understands Tashlumin is a Shachris Shalei Bizmano. That's what it is. This is a question, as always when you learn Gemara, of definitions. According to the Nachlas David, we end up saying that a Tashlumin is something new. It's called Tashlumin. We need to understand what it is, but it's Tashlumin. It's got nothing to do with Shachris. There is no such thing as a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano, and once it's Chatzos, it's game over. The Pnei Yeshua says no. We knew right from the start when we asked the question, we knew. Why did we ask a question to Tefillas Hashachar? We knew it was Tashlumin, but we knew that Tashlumin is a Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. That's what it is. So what's the answer then? That's where it becomes problematic. So what's the answer? The answer is we're talking about special, and the way he brings this in is by showing, why is this only for a shogeg? If Shachris has actually a longer time period, so why is that second time period only for a shogeg and not for a mezid? And he says that the truth is, and this is the chiddush of Tashlumin, the chiddush of Tashlumin is the removal of permission from people who deliberately didn't daven Shachris. We remove the second time frame of Shachris Shalei Bizmano. Chazal basically fined them. It's a knas. But it is, what Tashlumin is a Shachris Shalei Bizmano. Yes, you're right. So the initial distinction of Schar Tefillah Bizmano versus Schar Tefillah remains. Not like the Nachlas David. That remains. You're right. Like we said before, we asked the question, how can Shachris be longer? Yes, it can. Our mission is only talking about Schar Tefillah Bizmano, the ideal way. Shachris itself actually goes on all day, pretty much. If you want to do it Bizmano, it's up until Chatzos. Shaloi Bizmano, there is something called Shachris Shaloi Bizmano, and that is what Tashlumin is. Tashlumin is Shachris Shaloi Bizmano. But if you deliberately don't daven Shachris, we will withhold permission from you to daven. We won't allow you. We'll stop and say, no, we're not allowing you to daven. That is the way he sees it. And this is going to make, this is just a very simple way of showing you how you can take a simple Gemara, what appears to be a simple Gemara, and depending on the way that you analyze it and understand it, the definitions, although we won't see it so much tonight, we're going to come up with real halachic differences. Some very real halachic differences. You see, because if it is a shacharis, well, shacharis has certain shacharis halachas, whatever they may be, right?
Also different texts.
Whereas a tefillah, sometimes it is,
Shalom.
sometimes it isn't. We'll come to that when we come to Shabbos and Yala V'Yovoi and all this stuff. We're going to get to that next week. But this is where we are heading in that direction. So the fundamental question that the Shaila, that the Achronim certainly talk about is, what is this Tefillas Tashlumin? Is it a last chance? In English we say you drink in the last chance saloon, yeah? Is this your last opportunity to do a shacharis, even though it's not ideal, but it is actually a shacharis? Or is it something, totally new? It's called Tefillas Tashlumin. And we're going to discover huge differences between them. But it's based on how we understand this piece of Gemara. Okay? Any questions? Yeah, go on.
Is it also called Tefillah Tashlum if it's if you forgot to daven mincha or no? Like, is it the
I'm not with you.
the tefillah that you make to make it up?
Yeah, it's the one
also
that
called
it's so. For example, it would be. Let's say you forgot to daven mincha. So we saw Rabbi Yechon says you can daven Mariv twice. So it is a mincha, which raises again all sorts of questions. It's shalei bizmano. It's at night, and we're going to have to deal with all of that.
And that's also Tashlum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like a Oberbegriff.
Genau.
I think
Yeah.
it also makes a big difference how you frame it, if it's a shachas or if it's just a different entity.
Yeah.
Like the question Gershon said.
Go on.
When you're able to do it, because if you say it's a separate entity,
Correct. That's going to be one of the
you can give it a
nafkaminas.
specific time frame. But if you say it's just not the right time to daven shachas, then it's just outside different time frame.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's,
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get to that as well. Okay. I'm wondering. We'll probably leave it for tonight. Okay, but we have got. Okay, so we've begun. We're getting our teeth into it slowly. Next time we will do a Tosfos, and we'll then start all the unpacking all of these different details. And when it's going to get really juicy, as we get over the page, it's going to be very obvious if you forgot mincha on a Friday afternoon. So you'd have on Friday night, Mariv twice. Which Menesra do you say? Atochen Antonu, Yale V'Yovai, Avelu. So it's going to, and there's a lot of good, very geschmacker stuff coming. I hope next week. Thank you for joining me. We will.